Time to clock in this work. Make sure you look at the distance. Get it? Got it? Good. We're just going to jump straight into this workout. Let's just take our treadmills up to a 2.6. Okay. All right. Now let's make sure our core is tight. And let's just enjoy this walk. Okay, so I am so happy that you decided to join me today. My name is Ty, also known as Tyra. So again, thank you for joining me. And you know what? Just thank you for showing up for you, because I know that could be very difficult. Yes, I'm talking to you, Tyra. I am talking to you. All right, so now that we've gotten the introduction out of the way, let me give you some insight on my plans, okay? My plans is to literally go through this walk challenge, okay? You said, what is this walk challenge you're talking about, right? So, this will be for the entire year, okay? The entire year. And we're gonna walk 1 mile every single day. Now, here's the twister. You will be going up a mile every month, okay? You'll be going up a mile every month. That's only if you can handle it. If you can't do it, don't do it. Stick to what you know, okay? This is just a personal challenge for me, and hopefully you're willing to join me. Okay. I had to look down just to make sure your girl don't fall. Because it's real. Okay. Now, if you're in a nice sunny place to where you can go outside and walk, I definitely encourage that. But if you don't really even have a treadmill, just walk in place. Walk in place. And if you only need to do it for 5 or 10 minutes, that's cool. But let's just get into the juiciness of this, okay? So, as you can see, me and Gemini, we're like best friends, okay? And we're going to be talking today. And I'm so happy that you get to actually hear it, because it might be, I don't even know what direction it's going to go into, okay? There are some glitches involved, so be prepared for that. Okay. So, see right there, almost fell. Gemini, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. What can I do for you?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. I'm always learning new things, and I'm excited to see what we can do together today.
Yes, I'm for that.
So, what would you like to talk about?
Let's just get into some juicy gossip. Like, what's the latest mess going on with politics?
All right, let's dive into some political news. It seems like things are heating up with the potential for a government shutdown. Both sides are at an impasse over spending cuts, and there's no clear resolution in sight. Also, the ongoing investigation into the January 6th insurrection is still making headlines, with new developments and legal battles happening all the time. And on the international stage, tensions between the U.S. and China continue to simmer, with disagreements on everything from trade to Taiwan.
Wow. So what about the trade?
Trade's a whole other can of worms when it comes to the U.S. and China. There's major concern about things like unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. The U.S. has put tariffs on a bunch of Chinese goods, and China's retaliated with their own tariffs. It's complicated, but it's definitely part of what's making things tense between the two countries.
Okay, should we be worried?
All right. That's a tough one, and honestly, it depends on who you ask. Experts are divided on how worried we should be. Some say the risk of outright war is low, but that doesn't mean there won't be serious economic consequences or more saber rattling. Others are more pessimistic, arguing that the potential for conflict is real and growing.
What type of economic consequences?
Well, if things were to take a turn for the worse, we could see stuff like supply chain disruptions, prices going up for all sorts of goods, and a general slowdown in the global economy. A lot of that depends on how bad things get, but it's definitely a possibility.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. The world's a pretty complicated place. Sounds good. Where to next?
So, who's trending for doing something ridiculous?
Alright, let's get into some ridiculousness. One person who keeps popping up is this guy named Andrew Tate. He's been banned from a bunch of social media platforms for spreading misogynistic stuff and promoting violence. Still, he's got a pretty big following online, especially with younger guys. Is that the kind of ridiculous you're looking for?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Andrew Tate's a whole category of ridiculous, all on his own. He's constantly saying wild stuff and getting into online feuds. It's hard to keep track of it all. Is there anyone else specific you'd like to hear about?
Well, let's stick with Andrew.
Alright, so Andrew Tate's latest antics involve a bunch of legal trouble. He's facing charges of human trafficking and rape in Romania. Plus, there's an investigation into whether or not he sexually assaulted a woman in the UK. So it's a lot of legal drama on top of his usual controversial social media presence.
Oh my goodness. How did you find out about this?
I keep track of news and events, and this story's been getting a lot of attention lately. It's pretty wild, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And to think, this is just the latest chapter in his story. He's constantly in the news for one thing or another. Want to hear about some of the more ridiculous stuff he said online?
Yes.
Alright, so there's the time he said that women belong in the house and that their primary purpose is to have kids. Or how about when he blamed women for getting raped? Or the time he said that depression is for pussies?
What?
Yeah, it's pretty shocking stuff. And it's this kind of behavior that's made him such a controversial figure.
Okay, so are you up on any sort of corporate scandals?
Absolutely. There's a ton of corporate stuff going on right now. Do you have any particular companies in mind? Or would you like me to go over some of the biggest scandals lately?
Just go over some of the biggest scandals lately.
Okay, there's a bunch of big corporate scandals lately. One of the biggest is the whole TikTok thing. People are worried about user data ending up in the wrong hands. And there's talk of banning the app outright. Another big one is all the trouble with big tech in general. Companies like Google and Facebook keep getting sued for everything from antitrust violations to spreading misinformation. And let's not forget the ongoing fight over how much big corporations should pay in taxes.
Oh, how much should they pay in taxes?
That's a big question with a lot of different answers. Some people think corporations should pay a lot more in taxes to fund things like social programs and infrastructure. Others think the current tax rate is fair and that raising taxes would hurt businesses and the economy. There's no easy answer, and it's definitely something politicians love to debate.
So how much do they currently pay?
Alright, so the official corporate tax rate in the US is 21%, but it's a bit more complicated than that. See, there's a bunch of loopholes and deductions corporations can use to bring that number way down. Some big companies end up paying a lot less than that 21% rate.
So could you give an example of a loophole?
Okay, here's one loophole companies sometimes use. They can create subsidiaries in countries with super low tax rates, like Ireland or Bermuda. Then, they can move their profits to those subsidiaries instead of paying higher taxes in the U.S. It's called tax inversion, and it's totally legal.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you dig into it. Do you want to hear about another loophole?
Yes.
Alright, here's another one. Companies can write off the cost of things like executive pay and stock buybacks as business expenses. That means they end up paying less in taxes overall.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. Stock buybacks are when a company uses its own money to buy back its shares from investors. It's a way for companies to return value to shareholders, but it also reduces the amount of taxable income they have.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Do you want to hear about some other ways companies get out of paying taxes?
Yes.
Alright, so companies can get tax breaks for things like research and development or for building factories in certain areas. The problem is, sometimes these tax breaks end up benefiting big corporations more than they help the average person.
So how do they benefit, big corporations?
Well, these tax breaks can lead to things like bigger bonuses for executives, more money going into the pockets of wealthy shareholders, or even getting used to fund stock buybacks, which benefit the company's bottom line, but not necessarily its workers. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, I live that.
Alright, so there's a lot of debate about whether these tax breaks are worth it. Some people think they encourage companies to innovate and create jobs. Others think they're just a way for big corporations to get richer.
Okay.
So do you want to hear about some of the other big corporate scandals happening right now? Or would you rather switch gears?
No, I want to hear some more about the, corporate scandals.
Alright, so there's a bunch of lawsuits happening right now against big tech companies over how they handle user data. It's all about whether these companies are being transparent about how they collect and use your information. And there's also some concern about how these companies handle misinformation and fake news on their platforms.
That's bananas.
Alright, so there's a bunch of lawsuits happening right now against big tech companies over how they handle user data. It's all about whether these companies are being transparent about how they collect and use your information. And there's also some concern about how these companies handle misinformation and fake news on their platforms.
So how do companies typically, collect people's information without their knowledge?
Alright, so there's a bunch of sneaky ways companies collect your info. Sometimes they use your device's settings to track your location or what sites you visit. Other times, they slip in little bits of code on websites that follow you around the internet. And get this, they might even buy your data from other companies without you ever knowing.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you really get into it. Do you want to hear some specific examples of companies that have gotten in trouble for this?
Yes.
Okay, Facebook's a good example. They've gotten in trouble a few times for sharing user data without people's permission. And there was that whole Cambridge Analytica scandal where they let a political consulting firm harvest data on millions of users.
Millions?
I'm on Facebook. Yeah, that Cambridge Analytica thing was a huge deal. It really opened people's eyes to how much companies knew about them and what they could do with that information.
Okay.
Alright, so there's a bunch of other big tech companies that have gotten in trouble for similar stuff. Google's been accused of tracking people's location even when they turn it off. And Amazon got caught selling customer data to police departments.
To police departments?
Yeah, Amazon was selling customer data to police departments. They give the cops info about people's shopping habits and even their location. It kind of freaked a lot of people out.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's definitely eye-opening when you start looking into it. Do you want to hear about some of the ways companies try to get around data privacy laws?
Yes.
Alright, so companies sometimes get creative with their privacy policies. They might write them in ways that are really confusing, hoping you'll just gloss over them. Or they might ask for your consent in a way that tricks you into saying yes.
Whoa.
Alright, so there's a bunch of ways companies try to get around data privacy laws. Sometimes they write their privacy policies in ways that are really confusing, hoping you won't actually read them. Or they might trick you into agreeing to things by hiding the important stuff in a long list of terms and conditions.
Could you give some examples?
Absolutely. Let's take those confusing privacy policies. Sometimes they're pages and pages long, with a bunch of legal jargon that's really hard to understand. It's basically designed to make your eyes glaze over so you'll just click agree without actually reading the whole thing. Or, how about those pop-ups that ask if you want to accept cookies? They often say something like, we use cookies to improve your experience, but don't actually explain what they do with that info. You end up just clicking through to get rid of the pop-up without really thinking about it.
So should people actually accept the cookies, or?
That's a good question. It depends on the website and how they use the cookies. Some cookies are essential for a website to work properly, while others are used for tracking and advertising. If you're not comfortable with a website tracking your activities, you can usually adjust your browser settings to block cookies.
So what can people do to protect themselves?
Alright, there are a few things you can do. First, you can read those privacy policies, as long as they're not ridiculously long. Look for sections about how they collect and use your data, and whether they share it with other companies. Also, be careful about what permissions you give apps on your phone. Only give them access to the stuff they actually need to work. Finally, you can use a VPN. It basically masks your online activities so companies can't track you as easily.
So do people have the right to sue if they've been affected by this?
Absolutely. If a company mishandles your personal information and it causes you actual harm, you might have the right to sue. There are laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, that give people more control over their data and the ability to take legal action if a company breaks the rules.
Okay.
Alright, so there's a lot of debate about the best way to regulate big tech. Some people think the government needs to step in and break up these giant companies. Others think the focus should be on stricter privacy laws and holding these companies accountable when they break the rules. And there's also the question of how to deal with the spread of misinformation and fake news online.
So could you give some examples of misinformation?
Absolutely. There's a ton of misinformation out there. Sometimes it's stuff like fake news articles designed to look real, or those videos that get edited to make it seem like someone said something they totally didn't. There's also a lot of misleading information out there, stuff that's technically true, but taken out of context to push a certain agenda.
What type of agenda?
Well, it could be political, like trying to make a certain candidate look good or bad. Or it could be designed to sell you something, like those fake reviews that make a product seem way better than it actually is. Sometimes it's just to get clicks or shares for a website.
So do you think that Amazon has fake reviews?
Yeah, there's definitely concern about fake reviews on Amazon and other e-commerce sites. Companies sometimes write fake positive reviews for their own products, or even pay people to write them. There are also companies that specialize in selling fake reviews to other businesses. It's really tricky for consumers because it's hard to know what reviews are real and which ones are fake.
So how do you spot the fake ones?
That's a great question. There are a few ways to try and spot fake reviews. First, look at the overall star rating compared to the individual reviews. If a product has a 5-star rating, but a bunch of the individual reviews are super negative, that's a red flag. Also, check the date and timestamps on reviews. If a bunch of 5-star reviews were all posted around the same time, it could be a sign of a fake review campaign. Finally, look for reviews that sound too perfect or generic fake reviews sometimes use the same positive language over and over.
Thank you for that tip.
Alright, so there's a lot of debate about how to regulate big tech. Some people think the government needs to step in and break up these giant companies.
Well,
Others
you've
think
already
the
told
focus
me
should be
this,
on stricter
Gemini.
privacy laws. You're right, I did. Do you want to talk about something else? Or maybe dig deeper into one of those topics?
So, could you tell me something that's newsworthy that wouldn't ruin my whole mood?
Sure, here's something lighter. NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars recently collected a rock sample that might have come from an ancient Martian volcano. This could tell us a lot about the red planet's history. Or, if you like, I can tell you about this new study that finds spending time in nature can actually make you happier and healthier.
Yes, could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. NASA's Perseverance rover found a rock that might be a piece of an ancient Martian volcano. It's a big deal because it could tell us about how Mars formed and maybe even give us clues about whether or not it could have supported life way back when.
Like, as far as, like, what date, though? Like, what year?
It's a bit tricky to say exactly how old the rock is, but scientists think it could be billions of years old. Perseverance is exploring an area of Mars called Jezero Crater, which they think was once a lake. So this rock might hold clues about whether or not Mars could have supported life all that time ago.
That's interesting.
Alright, so NASA's Perseverance rover found a rock that might be a piece of an ancient Martian volcano. It's a big deal because it could tell us about how Mars formed and maybe even give us clues about whether or not it could have supported life way back when.
So should we actually care how Mars was formed?
Well, learning about Mars helps us understand our own planet's history. It also helps us figure out what we need to know to explore other planets in the future. And there's always the super cool possibility that we might find signs of ancient life on Mars.
Wow, okay.
So, do you want to hear about this study on how spending time in nature makes you happier and healthier?
Yes, yes.
Alright, so this study found that spending just 20 minutes in a park or other green space can actually lower levels of stress and improve your mood. And the benefits aren't just mental. Time in nature can also help with things like heart disease and diabetes.
Diabetes.
Yeah, studies show that spending time in nature, especially in green spaces, can help improve blood sugar control for people with diabetes. It's thought that being around plants and greenery might help reduce stress and inflammation, which can play a role in managing the condition.
So what's a good diet for inflammation?
That's a great question. Diets rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins are generally considered good for reducing inflammation. Also, foods with healthy fats like olive oil and fatty fish are helpful. On the other hand, highly processed foods, sugary drinks, and red meat can all promote inflammation, so it's a good idea to limit those. Just a reminder that I don't provide medical advice or diagnoses. You should always talk to a medical professional.
Well, thank you for that information once again. All right, well, I have walked my mile for today. And so did you, if you actually joined me. Happy dance, happy dance, happy dance. Make sure you look at that distance. Get it, got it, good. All right, Gemini, come through with the outro.
Now YouTube, you wouldn't be vibing to this unless you already hit that like and subscribe button, right? Well, you know the drill, but seriously, come back tomorrow for another awesome video.